I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. I'm here with Ian Burns, our managing editor, all the way in from snowy Ottawa. Foggy here in Kelowna, but traffic's moving. In Ottawa, Ian, still mountains of snow.
Yeah, really, almost quite comically high piles of snow, but it is sunny today, which makes it all a little bit better.
Sunny ways are on the way. How's that? BC, they finally sat legislature, and then there was a BC throne speech that even cites the war against the Nazis to portray the province in this historic battle. Maybe you can kind of give us a bit of a recap of what was said in that throne speech.
It was, focused quite a lot on the Trump situation and referenced Winston Churchill, D-Day, and the Nazis. Obviously, got to get the Nazis in, haven't you? If you want to be taken seriously, got to mention the Nazis. Bit of a strange one. I mean, I'm not sure what there's an entire sort of class of Americans whose job it is to monitor Canadian politics and report back what they hear. I'm not sure what they're going to make of that, being compared to the Nazis in some sort of obscure way, but a bit odd. But it was a lot of doom and gloom as well, and uncertainty and promises not kept. Like they said that they were gonna, the NDP said that they were gonna introduce middle class tax cuts, and they say that's not going to happen anytime soon. Obviously, they already kind of got the $1,000 check cancellation out there early so that it didn't completely dominate the headlines after this speech. And then afterwards, David Eby referred to the United States as a foe, as an enemy, which is another interesting line.
It's
I mean, I guess it does feel that way right now, but it was basically all about America and quite a lot of pessimism, I think, about the future for BC.
I mean, it's kind of the NDP liberal MO is to find, somebody for you to hate, whether, like in COVID, there was always somebody to hate. And right now, in the housing crisis, they found somebody for you to hate. And now they found a new person to hate. And I think, pulling out that Nazi term. I remember when the truckers were pulling that out and saying it felt like Nazi Germany, they said, how dare you use those comparisons? Yet they seem to be willy-nilly throwing that word around.
It does seem a little bit ludicrous to say that, doesn't it? I must say. But as for like picking out somebody to hate, it does happen to be the case, undeniably true, that Donald Trump is very, very easy to hate from the Canadian perspective, isn't he? I don't
Yeah.
think they're having to like lead British Columbians by the nose and force them
But,
to hate Donald Trump. I think that comes quite naturally. But
but
yeah, certainly. I mean, undoubtedly, you have to say that they're maybe taking advantage of that situation a little bit to get some bad news out and then blame it all on him.
Yeah, declaring all-out war seems odd, because we are neighbors and we will be neighbors because there's no way that we can not be neighbors. We're not moving, and they're not moving. So we definitely need to figure out a way to work with our neighbors too. And I think, like hopefully calmer heads will prevail. Danielle Smith seems to be still holding her head, and I'm not sure why all of a sudden David Eby has gone straight into like wartime rhetoric. And then again, cutting the $1,000 they promised, which they could have delivered long before this Trump threat was even here, because they delayed sitting legislature. That $1,000 gone. So is the middle class tax break now. And then he said he was going to get rid of the carbon tax, and and it sounds like everybody even in the liberal leadership is getting rid of the carbon tax. So where was Eby's talk on getting rid of that carbon tax? He said if the liberals get rid of it, he'll get rid of it. So that remains to be seen if that promise gets kept.
Yeah. Well, on the sort of industrial side and energy side, there was a lot in the speech, and there is a lot coming out of the NDP actually lately about new projects and trying to trade more with Asia in particular, but also Europe. Um, and that can only be looked upon as positive, I would say. But
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
they
I
apparently as
couldn't.
well, every single minister in in the cabinet in BC has been told to speed up project permitting, to try and build the economy basically. So I mean, I mean, you could ask the question, why wasn't that done years
Exactly.
ago? But
Why do we
at
why
least it
do
is being done, I think.
why do we find ourselves in this predicament? I mean, they have to take responsibility for that. For 10 years, we've been complacent, and we haven't built the pipelines that are necessary and all that. And now all of a sudden, um, we're in this predicament, and not taking any responsibility for why we're here.
Yeah, well, the BC Conservatives, a lot of their response was about the absence of um, any sort of details about how the BC government is going to try and clamp down on fentanyl,
Yeah.
because obviously that's presented as the rationale from Trump when it comes
And
to these tariffs. So that was one thing they said, but also I think there was quite a lot of criticism of the deficit and the general kind of fiscal position that British Columbia finds itself in, which is very, very negative. I mean, relatively speaking, anyway. It's bad. There's a big deficit, lots of overspending, quite a lot of debt as well, and then obviously lost the AAA rating as well. That was last year, I believe, wasn't it? So I mean, there's a lot of criticism of their handling of the finances.
yeah, I mean, BC has been lagging for a while, lagging in GDP per capita, leading in inflation, and a whole bunch of different economic indicators. And it is a rich province. Our forestry, I would argue, is still in shambles. We don't have a plan, and it causes a lot of wildfires in the summer, and then no real plan. Like again, we've done lots of stories on it. Canfor, one of Canada's, well, British Columbia boring company, um, has says it's not viable to invest in British Columbia because of our policies here. So I mean, those are the things that need to get addressed. Um, and then especially in LNG too, that recent contract that Japan did with the United States, that should have been our contract. And then the same thing goes for when the Germans were begging for LNG.
Yeah, but the Qataris ended up getting that, didn't they? I think they were the main beneficiaries of Canada's hesitancy.
Yeah, no business case. Trucker convoy. Pat King given 3-month conditional sentence. That's been a long time, that court case, right?
Yeah, and that's also time served, which comes to about 9 months. So it's basically 1 year, 1 year house arrest is basically what it adds up to, which is not what the Crown wanted. The Crown wanted a decade in prison. They wanted 10 years in jail for mischief, which is I find that astonishing, but that's actually on the books that it can go up to 10 years for mischief. I think of mischief as like stupid kids doing things, you don't usually think of it as being that extreme of an offense, but apparently you can get 10 years for mischief, and that's what they wanted. But no, a year of well, 3 months of house arrest and then 9 months spent sentence already, and then 100 hours, I think, of community service. So not too bad. I imagine he's going to be quite happy about that overall.
Uh, 3 weeks community service parked outside Justin's home honking his horn. That's a joke.
Well, he's also, and another interesting thing is there's also like a kind of restraining order being put in place, so he
Is there?
can't go, and not related to Trudeau, but he can't go anywhere near the other organizers, like that
Mhm.
Tamara
Has to
Lich and
stay away
oh,
from them. There you go.
yeah, so there's certain people he can't see, and he also can't go to Ottawa either. I think it's the entire city of Ottawa, which is a bit funny to be told you can't go to your capital city. You're just banned.
That was back in the old cowboy days when they would ban you out of town, right?
Yeah, banishment, or even the ancient Greeks, like banished to somewhere else, banished to the provinces.
And then you and I have been talking about this for a while. Like, why doesn't Canada have any high-speed rail? And the friends of ours listen to our show all the time, the Liberals, and they took another one of your ideas. And I think you go back one there, Nick. Justin Trudeau announcing. No, oh, there you go. Justin Trudeau announcing high-speed rail between Quebec City and Toronto.
Yeah, 20 million people live there apparently in that
In
that
that
corridor.
corridor. Yeah.
huge amount of. I mean, it's like, yeah, I'm sure most people have seen those maps where they like draw a line and it gets that bit of Ontario and Quebec, Southern Ontario and Southern Quebec, and it's like that's more than 50% of Canada's population
Yeah,
when you include people like beneath that latitude. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer from an economic perspective to put it there. But like we've said many times, I not just because the geography is better, but also maybe because the politics will be more conducive to it being completed faster. You'd think they would look at Edmonton, Calgary as like a
that's true.
complete no-brainer, just so easy because like
Yeah,
the Albertans would fast track that. You would have to assume that they would. They don't tend to hang about, do they? They get on with things. Whereas this thing here, the government's given like $4 billion or something like that, and that's so that they can spend up to 6 years planning
yeah.
the design, so designing the railway, not building it,
Well,
but like, designing it. So that's a lot of very, very expensive PowerPoint presentations. And
yeah, and
obviously, Carney or Polyev or whoever's the next prime minister, next long serving prime minister, might just say, nah, and then that's all gone anyway. So
I think they need to go back and look at one of our shows. I think about a month ago with that, and I can't remember the name of the Chinese town where they built a railroad that was quite a bit faster than this. I believe it was 426 kilometers an hour, which is quite a bit faster than this 300 kilometer an hour top speed thing here they're talking about. And it was built in a short order. Maybe they should hire that company to build the rail here instead of spending 6 years planning it.
another thing they could do is resurrect some corpses from the 19th century in Canada and America and Britain and ask the Victorians, how on earth did you build things in like a few years? Because we're incapable of doing that now, apparently.
Mm.
I think we need to like access the wisdom of our forebears because
Mm.
looking at this, if this is ever completed, I would say that if I ever get to ride on one of these trains, almost certainly I'll be taking my wheelchair or my Zimmer frame because I would say this is going to be like decades
Well,
till this is done.
and then the other thing is like the rail travel again. If you look to China, like the speed of their rail, and Europe has some high speed rail as well. Finland has high speed rail. Like, how do they do it? I mean, we should be going there instead of like spending 6 years planning. I think just a couple of plane tickets maybe. And
Yeah,
the savings though, Toronto to Ottawa right now takes 4 hours and 26 minutes. The new one, the 300 kilometer an hour one, would take 2 hours. So
it's
savings of,
pretty amazing, yeah.
yeah, good time
And
savings.
then Montreal. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Europe there because funnily enough, this is a consortium of businesses. There's six businesses, six contractors or whatever, who are involved in this project, who've won the bid. One of them is Air Canada for some reason, which are people already like, why are they involved? But the rest of them, what? So there's one here called Sistra, that's French. There's one called Keolis, that's French. Then there's one called Atkins Realis, that's from Montreal. Then CDPQ, that's also from Montreal. And then SNCF, which is the French state, the government-owned train company from France. So it's a very, very good deal for the French, I would say. They're getting involved. No sort of non-French speaking companies were invited or involved. So I did find that quite amusing, and nobody seems to have picked up on that yet. None of the press reports, but I'm sure that's gonna be a point of contention because it's a little bit crazy when he gave this speech and it was a kind of like it was a chest pumping Canada's great kind of speech, and he was saying this is the largest ever infrastructure project in Canada and we're going to use lots of Canadian steel, lots of Canadian aluminium, so obviously a reference to the tariffs that the Americans have put on Canadian steel, and it was all about jobs for Canadians and so on, and yet the companies involved are either French or from Montreal. So I mean it's more of a sort of Quebec France collaboration, really, on the face of it, isn't it?
Yeah. Somebody's saying they can see the contrast and says we don't read the comments. We read the comments and we talk about them when they're not mean. So, well, sometimes even if they're mean, but at least funny, not just being mean. So yeah, implementing universal basic income would cut poverty rates up to 40%. Um, there you go.
Yeah, and it only costs $100 billion per year. cheap as chips.
Yeah. And then we're going to pay for that with,
A carbon tax on the big polluters, maybe.
I mean, that's something that Karina Gold is pushing. We'll talk about that in a bit, but that's, that's one of the things that she's looking to do. Um, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture on Tuesday acknowledged that over the weekend it accidentally fired several agency employees who were working with the federal government on the response to the H5N1 avian flu outbreak, which is driving the cost of eggs up all over the United States.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty hard to understand that level of incompetence, isn't it? But and this is being seized upon by people that are upset
Mm,
about the whole Doge
yeah.
movement or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, definitely they have to put their hands up here and say that they did something extraordinarily dumb there.
They broke
But
a few eggs and they're trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. How's that?
yeah, something like that.
And that's, I mean, they did say that they're going to make some mistakes and they're going to try and correct the mistakes as they move along. So, but obviously the avian flu in the U.S. is wreaking havoc, and it's happening here as well. So, and it's causing the price of eggs to go quite high.
Insanely high
MPs
in America, yeah.
MPs criticize wealth hoarding boomer stereotypes. So yeah, so now they're going after the boomers in the
Well,
UK.
they're trying to defend the boomers. The MPs are anyway,
Well, that's what I'm
and
saying.
they're
But
saying
people
that
people are going
because
after them.
obviously we're all familiar with that by now, I assume. The
Yeah,
MPs have finally caught up and decided to write a report about it, but we're all familiar with the jokes about boomers and how like they bought a house in 1975 for like $500 that's now worth 1.5 million or something.
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of intergenerational resentment, and it's some of it is absolutely justified, I would say, but the mistake that's made is that people tend to just like blame individual boomers as though they did something bad or something just because they had a better go of things. I mean, that's a bit ridiculous. But the British response, anyway, is typically stupid for the modern, and it typically sort of, it is typical of the modern British state, which is let's have a crackdown on media that promotes this negative boomer stereotype.
And you put this next one in here, Donald J. Trump post. And let you talk about it there.
Just an astonishing rant, screed against the the president of Ukraine, who refers to there, as you see, a modestly successful comedian, and then later on refers to him as a dictator, and then said if he doesn't move fast, then he's not going to have a country left, and so on and so on. Zelensky's done a terrible job, blah blah blah. But I mean, it's like he never said anything like this leading into the election, and he hasn't said anything like this since he was inaugurated either. This is like he's now gone all out
Mm-hmm.
against Zelensky, and I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier. It's like how I don't understand. I mean, I guess maybe he's playing like 15-dimensional chess or something like that, and he understands things that I don't, and that nobody else in the world understands. But I really don't get how this is in America's interests to be very friendly and nice with an actual dictator and be very insulting and offensive to a guy who is not a dictator, even if he is obviously imperfect.
Well, if you look at all of Trump's actions, really a lot of them are driven by money, right? Even his actions against Canada, he's talking about money, always about money, right? How America's getting ripped off, and it's all about he wants more money. And then this is what this post is really it's a rant about money. He says the Americans have spent $350 billion on this war, and they didn't get anything back for it. And whereas the Europeans, he said it's a loan, and so that's why Trump's trying to change it into a trade for critical minerals. And he says the European money was basically a loan, and I'm doing what he does, repeating myself here, and that the Americans didn't get anything in return. And so he's doing his usual attack on that. And I did watch an interview with Zelensky, and he doesn't know where a lot of the money went. And then, like if the Europeans gave 200 million and the Americans gave 350 million, it's almost $1 trillion and or billions, right? Um,
That's I should just interject and say that's actually false. That's not an accurate number. The Americans haven't given 350
Oh,
billion.
okay.
He's invented that, and the
There you
Europeans
go.
have given more than the Americans.
Well, there you go.
Collectively,
So,
Europe has given more than the Americans.
but again, billions and billions of dollars, and I did watch an interview, and they're not sure where a lot of it went. So, but the other thing that is really kind of the devastating human impact of it is like they say the numbers are somewhere close to 2 million people on both sides have died in this tragic war already.
Yeah, God knows. I mean, it's often obviously there's deaths and there's wounded, and they're kind of two different. Obviously, they're two different categories. Wounded people are still alive, but I mean, I'm sure if you've seen any of the kind of interviews with people or documentaries or whatever in Ukraine, there are an awful lot of Ukrainian men who now have like are missing limbs and things like that, or
Yeah.
they're really seriously hurt. Like their lives are never going to be the same again. So it's kind of I feel like it's justified to add wounded to the dead in this situation because this is like just the nature of this war is so disgusting. It's such a vile war. It's like it looks as ugly and as sort of inhuman as like the First World War. It's really horrible conflict. But yeah, I mean that aside, the tragedy of all that, it is important to mention what I just said. The Europeans have given more than the Americans. Trump is I feel like he's got like the norovirus equivalent of like lying. Instead of diarrhea, it's lies. He just does not seem
Mm.
to be capable of stopping in the lies. I mean, what's he talking about? $350 billion. That's just a complete fabrication. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that that's even close to true. But obviously he doesn't care, does he? He just writes it. It's just out there. And then his legion of slaves just believe it automatically and go to bat for him because they are in his thrall. But he also forgets to mention that this war was pushed by the Americans. It was pushed by not him, obviously, not by the Trump administration, but it was pushed by
No.
Obama and Biden administrations. It's an American responsibility far more than it is a European one because
Yeah.
they had
I,
much more involvement
uh,
in the beginnings of this war. And they also pushed the Ukrainians a lot harder to fight it. And
yeah.
then also they've been implicated in blowing up Nord Stream 2, the gas pipeline, and putting a huge amount of pressure on the Europeans to not buy Russian gas and to instead buy, you guessed it, American gas. This whole thing it's like you've just been scammed by a criminal who's made your life miserable, and then he blames you and says that you should be grateful
I did. I
to have
did watch.
suffered.
I did watch an interview with the Europeans saying that Biden started this war, that America better finish it. So
Well, this is the thing with Trump, though. He's so partisan. He's so extraordinarily partisan that he sees the previous administration as not even America. Like there's no continuity in his mind. Whereas obviously a civilized country accepts that there's continuity between two different administrations being in charge of the same country. You can't just pretend that wasn't America. It's like, oh no, that was Biden that did that. So what if it was Biden? Biden's the US president. Now you're the US president. It's on your table. It's your responsibility. But it's just I just can't believe that we're only a couple of weeks into this presidency and we're already in this upside down world of madness. It's kind of I think quite a lot of the anti-Trump people are probably feeling very happy with themselves right now and very vindicated, I must say.
Ottawa spent a record amount on outsourcing despite vow to rein in practice, and that is like a common complaint. And like the Liberals have spent so much money on consulting and different things. It's just like ludicrous that the way that they utilize the taxpayers' dollars. And that's the story out of the Globe and Mail.
Good days for McKinsey and
Yeah,
KPMG and all those people that
yeah. A lot of that
may or
money
may
going
not have a
going
purpose in life.
going south of the border when the Liberals are telling you to buy Canadian. They spent over a couple $100 million on the McKinsey and Co. So there you go. In the this is the one that we should have went after, like the Green Party leader. They got a new logo, and it took them a year and a half to come up with their new logo. And we're going to play this small clip here from. Go ahead, Nick, if you can play that clip. We're just waiting here. Any thoughts on the logo, Ian? It's a green dot if we don't get to play.
I couldn't be more thrilled that this exercise, which you've heard has been a process of more than a year and a half.
I can hear it, but I can't see it, Nick.
Should come to such positive completion so we're able to
We're going to go with no playing it today. How's that?
I'm sure everybody's going to be very sad not to hear Elizabeth May speak.
Yeah, Elizabeth May is revealing the new logo for the Green Party, and we'll take away all the suspense for everybody. It's a green dot.
What's funny is up until this moment, I think the most infamous logo rebranding in democratic politics was the British Conservative Party, which spent an ungodly sum of money, and it took quite a long time as well for somebody to come back and draw a tree that looked like it had been drawn by a toddler. It was like that was a really hilarious moment in sort of like the political science world. And
there's been some
now it's
really,
just been overtaken, I think, by this.
There's been some really bad political rebranding ones, and you could even look at to British Columbia here when the BC Liberals rebranded to the United Party. That didn't go over very well.
Yeah, I think that's another one for the political science nerds, isn't it, to study in the future. And what's funny is I mean, who are we really? We're just a couple of nobodies, aren't we? But I remember at the time, straight away we had a conversation and we were like, "That's a mistake." And sure enough, there you go. Maybe we should join McKinsey, start charging
I
millions
wonder how
of
much they
dollars to
paid.
tell people not to do stupid things.
It took a year and a half, and I'm sure I could have done that with a crayon. Imagine, I don't know what they paid for it, but like, sure, a green dot. There you go. And we got a segment here now. We do the Liberal leadership race here, and then we've got Frank Baylis coming out with some talking points here. And Frank's saying he's going to expand the natural gas infrastructure, and he's going to improve a couple of pipeline corridors, diversify markets out of the U.S. Should have been doing that for a while. Lead in nuclear power. I mean, Canada is a leader in nuclear power, yet we've been kind of like remiss in doing anything of that. Upgrade our electrical grids, supercharge renewables. And then he also talks about a smarter carbon pricing plan, polluters to pay and funds go. This is kind of like what Mark Carney's talking about, a carbon border adjustment. That's basically the same as Mark Carney's talking about. And similar type things there, and a different way to repackage the carbon tax, right? So it doesn't look like Frank Baylis is giving up on the carbon taxing either. He's just repackaging it with a different name. And then Mark Carney, he's made in donations $1.9 million, 10 times more than Freeland has made. And then followed behind that is Karina Gold has pulled some money in. And he says, and then Carney is saying that 11,260 people have contributed small amounts, and 68% of those donations are less than 100. Doesn't talk about the other 32%, how much more of it is, like how large it is, right? So there's that. They can only give you part of the stats. But another interesting point there is that 34 of the sitting Liberal MPs, 22% not running for re-election. And some of them are bigger names, are cabinet ministers, right? Like we just seen yesterday. Pascal St. Onge say she's not going to run. Anita Anand was another one that announced recently. Harjit Sajjan. Lots of Liberal MPs not running. With what Carney's saying, that the Liberals, or the polls are saying that Carney's Liberals are going to, take government. Why are all these people not running then?
Well, maybe they're going to regret it. I'm sure that most of these will have bailed because they thought they were going to lose their seat and they didn't want to look like losers. Or they also, even if they kept their seat, they didn't really want to be in opposition because that's really, it's kind of boring, isn't it, to be in opposition, to be completely powerless for however many years it is, It's kind of, politicians often say that being in opposition really sucks and they really don't like it. So I'd
Yeah.
say it was a combination of those two things. But now that Carney looks like, I mean, we're saying all this based on polls, aren't we? Which may or may not be a load of crap, but we'll have to see. But now that Carney's looking like the man and he's bringing up the Liberals up close to a sort of tie with the Conservatives, maybe a lot of them are sort of regretting uh, resigning. I don't know. Maybe some of them will even come back.
So yeah, Ruby Dalla, like that's Ruby Dalla, another Liberal leadership candidate, says that the race right now, and this is from their own kind of like telephone poll that they did out of 42,000 people, according to her post here on her site there. I mean, sorry, on her account. Carney at 40%, Ruby at 33%, Freeland at 19%, and Gould at 7%, and Bayless at 1%. Bayless you don't hear from at all, really, right? Freeland is definitely making the rounds now. But Ruby doesn't get a lot of press either, though.
Well, she puts a lot of memes out there, but I think I think they look at her as being a bit awkward. But I can only imagine that they've put this money forward because they want to get to the debates, don't they? Because that's when they can actually announce themselves.
Yeah.
And they're all gonna try and like get a zinger in against Mark Carney, aren't they? I would imagine he's just going to be relentlessly targeted by all these also rans. But I suppose that's what they're hoping, that they can sneak in like that.
Yeah, so those debates are coming right up here. And then they're trying to freeze Ruby out of the French one because they're not going to give her a translator. And see that now she's posting in French, though. So she's got that figured out.
I just think that's so nuts. Earlier on this morning, the Canadian Armed Forces had a press conference where they were bragging about how they'd managed to get a few more recruits in recent months and how proud they were of themselves. And they were talking about how they were going to remove barriers, like if you've got ADHD, you can still join and now and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they said, which I just found in this context quite interesting, one of the things that one of the main generals said was, um, if we only like we have to get a really diverse population. We have to adopt this policy of looking for all kinds of people of other races and people who aren't citizens and people who have these medical problems, because if we aren't picking from 100% of the population, then we're going to lose as an institution, as an organization, because we're not going to get the best people, because we're going to be picking from a much smaller pool in that case. And I just think, why don't we just apply that logic there for a second to who's going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada? And we're told, apparently, by the Liberals and most other people in the political class in Canada, that you have to be bilingual to be the Prime Minister, or even to be a contender. You must speak French fluently and you must speak English fluently. But then I just think, how many people in Canada are completely or decently fluent in both languages? It's not going to be a very high percentage. So why is it okay for us to pick from this very small pool of people when it comes to the leader of the country? But when it comes to the military, it's like, oh no, we have to have everybody. That would be stupid not to have everybody in.
Well, I think what the military one is because they can't get anybody to join. Because we talked about this a number of times. Our complement right now is 55,000. It's supposed to be like 76 for a full complement, which is still really light. But I think a lot of it relates to the amount that we pay these people. It's starting at $43,000. And again, you've brought it up many times. It's not only that we're asking them to put their lives on the line, we're asking them to kill strangers.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty low pay when you're willing to pay a bureaucrat like almost triple that. And they refuse to work in the office. They need to work from home because they don't feel safe in the office and they feel safer at home. And then you're telling this guy that he has to go live in a ditch somewhere and fight, in like some pretty tough conditions. And even with, again, we talked about the sleeping bags. We don't even give them top-rated equipment.
Yeah. No, and then there's also, this is the case in a lot of Western countries, but there's also hovering over you as a soldier the possibility that your own country will prosecute you for what you did when your country sent you off to kill people. They'll say, all right, we did recruit you, we gave you really low wages, and then we sent you off to kill people, probably in a war that we shouldn't have bothered sending you to in the first place. And now that you've come back, we're going to sue you. We're going to prosecute you in the courts because we didn't like the way that you killed that person on our instructions. So it's kind of, you just can't win, really, can you? It's
And they
they
wonder
were
why.
asked in
And
this
they
press
wonder
conference, they
why.
were asked why not pay more money, and they just kind of dodged that question, really. So
Yeah, and they wonder why recruitment's low. Let's move on to the
indeed.
markets. Gold, again, just dancing around that number, 29.23. Not much change there, but you can see that the movement's been like kind of like slow and steadily up, right? So it looks like it wants to challenge that $3,000 mark. That'll be a big battle, as round numbers typically are big battlegrounds for things to move over. And so it looks like to challenge that. And crypto, in the crypto space, Bitcoin, really like kind of like just below that $100,000 mark, looking for that catalyst up. Again, that looks like a head and shoulders pattern. We talk about it every day, but not a lot going on. The markets are kind of like waiting for some big catalyst of some type. And here's the one that is interesting is the Canadian dollar. And Bloomberg did a story on it this morning, and we've been talking about it for the past couple of days. The Canadian dollar is not really believing that these tariffs are going to amount to much. If you go to the next chart, Nick, the Canadian dollar is definitely showing that it's confident that those tariffs aren't going to be that big of a deal. Because you see that drop down in the bottom right corner, that is those 25% tariffs, and then the relief from that and a quick bounce back up. But then the dollar's been climbing the last little while. So, and then I think the headline out of Bloomberg this morning was tariffs, a big yawn for the currency crowd. So, you know, again, a lot of bluster out of Trump lots of times, and the currency markets are saying more bluster than fact. Yet the liberals are blowing it up a lot because they're trying to get as much as they can to rally around. That is one of their, like tactics for sure. So, and it has been helping, and they, like they've even said that it's one of the things that they're using for a rally cry.
I mean, I would just say though, we're still down 4.5 cents on like 5 months ago. So that it's
Yeah.
still like
Well,
it's still a
for
really
sure.
bad situation for the dollar, but at least it's not going further down. Yeah.
But if the tariffs are real, it's a huge blow to our economy. That dollar, I mean, there's a lot of economists talking that dollar goes to 60 cents. So,
Yeah, could have been a lot worse, I guess. I mean, it still might be. We
well, it
shouldn't
still
be
can. Yeah,
complacent.
it still can. Yeah. On the AI world, Wendy's getting in on the action. Wendy's, they're going to put AI to work at the drive-through windows to improve. You're going to be talking to an AI assistant as you order your food, starting in the US there. So they say it's going to improve accuracy and probably a lot more upselling too. AI is
I
going
would
to be
also
this.
say, like, based on my last few experiences of going through drive-throughs, there's probably a much higher chance they'll understand what I'm saying, because usually the person on the other end doesn't have English as their first language, let's say.
Yeah, so it'll actually probably, like I said, the upsell stuff is probably going to be crazy. Like every now and then you get somebody that works it, right? Like, but they're going to use it might even get to the point where it's like recognizing, like, oh, good morning, Ian. Would you like the usual today? How about adding a donut to that order?
Yeah, but I wonder as well, if you make an order like 6 or 7 items or something, and then you notice on the screen that the second one is wrong, is it
Yeah.
going to be a real like pain to go like, how are you going to get it to correct that one? I don't know. I'm sure they'll figure it out though.
I've had conversations with AI. It's pretty good. It's actually really, really good. So it will likely end up. The cool thing about AI, it'll recognize your language if you're speaking a different language, and it'll just switch to that language. So, like if you happen to speak French and you're ordering in French, you're not going to have to struggle with that English speaking person, or vice versa, or other languages. The AI will switch the language to your language of choice, and will make sure that you get a full bag of healthy, well, maybe not so healthy, a full bag of food anyway, or something
Yeah.
that resembles food. How's that?
That is a very interesting idea, actually, that you've put out there, because it would make tourism in a country like, I was going to say Japan, but maybe like, let's say like rural China, where not very many people speak English at all. Like it's
Yeah.
very, actually quite rare to encounter somebody who speaks English when you get into the interior of China. But lots of people would like to go there as tourists. But if you think about in like 20 years where it's all been, treated with AI, you could theoretically go there as a tourist from anywhere in the
Yeah.
world and have like service in your language, which is very interesting, isn't it? Almost like
Well,
Star Trek, the
I've used
universal
it.
translator.
I've used the translator app though too, and it works pretty good. Like you just turn your phone on, it'll actually do the conversations for you, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I'm thinking like buses
Yeah.
and like food, like restaurants and so on. If it could all have this AI system built in, you could actually you could presumably kind of get around really easily and have a really like decent, easy time of it, even if nobody speaks English or whatever language you speak.
Like that on the other side of people might think that it might get a little too involved and it might say like, Ian, this is the fourth time you've been here this week and your weight is getting a little heavy. So we're going to get, instead of that cheeseburger, you can order from the salad menu.
Maybe, yeah, maybe you can get an AI that kind of lectures you if you. That might
Right.
just be a brand that people go in for.
Yeah, I remember watching when David Letterman used to do these spoofs. He was at the drive-through, and that's what he said to the lady who ordered like 2 cheeseburgers or something. He's like, maybe you should try a salad. And she got quite offended.
Another thing which is quite cool is maybe you'll be able to, if everybody has self-driving autonomous cars as well in
Yeah,
the future, you could maybe send your car out to McDonald's or Wendy's or whatever, and it'll just
yeah.
come back and deliver you your burgers.
There you go.
Convenience,
Anyway,
eh?
I do think that'll probably help in the ordering for, especially you say with the language barrier stuff. It'll probably speed that up. And again, in AI, Grok 3 released, and I've been using it a little bit. Even Sundar, I can't remember his last, Pichai, sent from Google, sent out
I
a
think it's Pichai.
congratulation. Pichai, there you go. Sent a congratulations to Elon Musk on looking forward to trying it out. So there you go.
Everyone's chums now, aren't they? All these tech boys, which is a little bit curious, considering that Google is like if you look at Google and then you look at X or you look at Elon Musk, they're considered to be on the exact opposite ends of the spectrum politically. Google is like famously associated with all the wokey stuff and the Democratic Party and all that, whereas Musk is actually a Republican administrator right now. But it's interesting that they're so friendly with each other.
Now they're all pals now, including Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, even Tim Cook was been there, and all that kind of stuff. They're all kind of getting along, which is like the impetuous for the what they talk about in the United States as a golden age for technology. So there you go. Lots of power in those few men there.
Extraordinarily powerful, yeah. Kind of a little bit scary if you look at it from a certain angle.
In our EV section, the Cybertruck achieves 5-star overall rating from NHTSA, including the lowest probability of all in injury and lowest chance of rollover of any truck ever tested by NHTSA. So there you go. Cybertruck, the tank.
Did you see that video of the Cybertruck stuck in the snow in
Yeah.
Canada? That did some bad. That was bad PR for the Cybertruck.
So just for everybody to realize on that. So being stuck in snow is all about the tires. Nothing really about the vehicle. Like good tires move you around. Bad tires, you can spin there. You could be driving whatever. Tires is everything. So when you're got children in the car, make sure you got good winter tires, good grip, and you won't be doing that, right? So tires is everything. It's all about the tires. And then Tesla just announced that new Model Y production officially started at Giga Shanghai, and the deliveries start next week. So that's the new with that new front light bar. Expect that one coming out. That's that next slide there, Nick. So that's starting to roll off the assembly lines. And then really big news, really bad big news, is Nikola filed for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and they're the ones that make those big electric trucks. So it was a hot startup. So the founder was convicted in 22 for misleading investors about that company. I think it was valued at $30 billion in 2020. and the market cap was bigger than Ford Motor Company. And there you go, another EV startup, and like we've seen like the one in Canada file too. I think it's the one in Quebec there.
I assume that Nikola is a reference to Nikola Tesla there, which is quite interesting. Maybe the market wasn't big enough to have both of that guy's names
No.
as companies. Had to just be one name.
There you go. Nissan has lobbied UK officials to relax the mandatory electric vehicle sales targets, expressing concerns over potential financial penalties and impacts on its Sunderland plant. Nissan in trouble as well, and then they had a deal that they had worked out with Honda, and then they didn't like the deal, and Honda and Nissan called it off. So Nissan in trouble though, lots of debt outstanding, and not really in that EV space, even though they were one of the leaders in that EV space with the Leaf. Like, like they were making the Leaf probably prior to even like, Tesla getting big things, and then they just never advanced it, right? It's just odd. There's a ton of those Leafs out there, right? Leaves falling all over the place. Leafs falling everywhere.
They were all the rage, weren't they? That almost entered like popular culture, didn't it? Like to reference your Leaf, but that seems to have disappeared.
Older technology, low range. Like you can pick them up pretty cheap in the resale market too, but they're, I think they're a good like, commuter in town kind of thing if you have a very short commute. But yeah, they just never advanced that technology, and it's funny because like I said, they were in there doing that and selling more than Tesla was selling, and all of a sudden they just didn't invest in that technology, right? So, and
Yeah, Nissan, though, I would say in this context of the UK, they do have huge amounts of political leverage in that country, and particularly in that city there, Sunderland. That's like in the industrial northeast of England where they used to build ships and mine coal and things like that, and it had really high unemployment. And then Margaret Thatcher and later on other prime ministers as well, like courted Nissan and got them to go there and build this huge plant. And it provides a lot of jobs and a lot of kind of high-paying jobs actually in an otherwise quite depressed area. So it's really politically sensitive, that Nissan plant. So I think pretty much whenever they ask for something, Nissan, they do tend to get it. So it'd be interesting to see if they can knock down the mandates there, because obviously in Britain as well, there's a chap called Ed Miliband. He's in charge of all the net zero stuff. He's very if you think Mark Carney is hardcore on the net zero stuff, I would like to introduce you to Ed Miliband. He's or even like he makes Stephen Guilbeault look like a moderate. He's very committed to net zero. So it's kind of those two forces are now going to crash into each other. I think that'll be interesting to see what wins.
well, Nissan in big trouble, and I owned a 350Z way back in the day, and I think that the Z series for a long time, from the 240Z, 260, 280, 300, and I think that they went to 350. It was car of the year, like I think like Motor Trend car of the year. Every year they announced that new model. I mean, they were great automakers, and then it's like just I don't know what happened to them, but they're definitely hanging by a thread, right? Like their sales have dropped off, profits have dropped off. They were trying to do that merger to save themselves, and then that fell apart because I think Honda was just going to say, like, you're just coming underneath. It's an acquisition, not a merger. And I don't think they liked that, and then it kind of fell apart in the last minute. But like, the only other people probably going to court them is probably the Chinese, and it's just so they can get access to the markets.
Well, the Japanese automakers already rely on China, don't they, anyway, for their production? Like as they became an older society and obviously wages increased as well, they moved their production to places like China. I think Vietnam is popular nowadays as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? But
Yeah.
they're already like in the bosom of China there, so it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to think that they would go all in and just
But
be owned by the Chinese.
a lot of those plants in China are being abandoned because they can't sell cars in China, because most of the people in China are buying EVs. Over 50% of the people are buying EVs, and there's like 100 plus automakers of EVs in China. Like they invited all these people in there, and then now they're buying these plants up or that are being abandoned, and then just taking them over with these new EV makers. And it's like, like Ford was there, GM was there, Subaru was there, Porsche was there, everybody was there, right? A lot of the Japanese automakers were there too.
Yeah,
Just
they've
can't
pulled
sell-
the rug.
they just can't sell their cars. Yeah, it was a good trick.
Well, yeah, I mean I think there was a certain amount of there was a certain amount of planning went into that. That's what they wanted to do. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how you climb up the ladder, isn't it? The value added ladder, I guess. But they've done it in a way that's upset a lot of people, because of their dubious trade practices, let's say.
Somebody's just saying $400 to get a key for a 2004 Nissan. That is one of the frustrations for a lot of people in like the cars with fobs, right? You get a fob, and like that key fob, and I'm sure the car you're driving has a fob, and you lose that fob, and it's like typically like you go to the dealership, it's $400 or $500 to get a new fob, and then they charge you to program it and all this stuff, and it's bulky, you know what I mean? And then if you look at
Yeah.
like what Tesla's done with keys, there is no key. It's your phone. That's it, right? Your phone acts as your key, and then you can share
Yeah.
that. And you've used mine, and I've shared the key with you. I just texted you the key, so there's no $400 key fob, and those fobs again, like I say, are bulky, and when you lose them or they break, some of them are really plasticky too. So it's a frustration of many people, these fobs.
And when the battery goes low as well, it's like that is very frustrating, isn't it? You got to like press the button a lot of times, and then you've got to go and find you got to go find the batteries. Then you've got to find a way to open it up. Usually, it's pretty hard to open it as well. It's like it is just a bit of a schlep in general. Yeah, so I'm surprised that more companies don't do the app thing because it is so much easier.
Yeah, it's funny, like if you look at the plastic, like they charge you $400 for this plastic thing that has a battery in it, and then you can buy a television, like a 65-inch TV, for
Yeah.
$400. Right? You
And
tell me
then
which.
also the people like if your fob breaks or something like that and you're locked out of your car, the amount of money you have to spend to get
Yeah.
somebody to come and do it to get you in is
Yeah.
absolutely insane as well.
You,
So I mean the whole thing
you,
can cost you well over $1,000 if
you
your
tell me
battery runs
what's
out.
what's better, like more technology in it, the television, the smart TV that can stream stuff from a satellite dish and play it into your living room, or that fob that is a piece of plastic really with a button in there, and they're charging you 400 $500. I've seen like some really expensive ones, especially the German automakers. They charge you like basically um, and then this person does say you can buy universal remotes, which is a lot of people are doing now. So you can go buy a universal remote, but a lot of people don't know that. They go to the dealership, and the dealership just says, welcome.
But they're also another thing, they're also like unsafe, aren't they? And a lot of car thefts nowadays don't they like capture the signal or something when you try and press the button, they capture it and then they can just get into your car. So they're not like they're actually kind of risky as well.
Again, one of the best things that for me is like, like because my wife had a car and I had a car, and we both had fobs. So you put the two fobs on your keychain because if you're changing vehicles or whatever, then you have these two heavy fobs. And then I've lost fobs too, like when you get a second fob and you hide it somewhere, so it's your spare, and then you forget where you hid it. And I remember selling my last car that had a fob, and then they're still asking me for the fob. And it's like, I have no idea where the second fob is, right? No idea whatsoever where I put it. Probably in a jacket pocket somewhere or wherever it is. I have no idea, but it's bulky, and it's one of the things that I really like about the car that I drive now is there's no fob, and I can share a key with anybody temporarily, and it's just unbelievable freedom in that regard. So there you go.
Yeah, it's very cool. And you also get to see where your car is and all sorts of stuff, don't
Yeah,
you,
you
on
can
the app?
spy. You can spy on your partner all the time. You can see where they are, what they're doing, how they're doing it, how fast they're going, and your kids too, right? You can spy on them as well. It's a great spy mobile.
You don't even have to get an AirTag to spy on your wife. You can just
No,
do it on your phone. Much
there you
better.
go. Or she can spy on you too, right? No more saying
Yeah, it's not
I'm just
necessarily one way.
I'm just at work while you're at the pub with the boys having that pint on the way home, right?
Yeah. You can't lie. That's the thing about this age. Technology has made it hard to be deceitful now, hasn't it?
Yeah. They track you with your car. My family, they track you with your car, and they track you with your phone and everything. So you're just basically, everybody knows where you are, I guess.
And you're probably on camera wherever you are as well. So yeah, there's absolutely no hiding.
Yeah, well, with the Tesla, you can actually access the cameras on the car too through the app. So there you go.
No escape.
No escape. Anyway, we ask that you follow us on Kelowna Now, on our YouTube, on our X. We typically go on at 9 o'clock. We were late this morning because we had one of the employees not feeling well, didn't come in, so we had to call somebody else in. And that's why Nick's on the keyboard this morning in the background. But also, we do send out a newsletter 365 days a year before 7 a.m. And we'd like you to sign up for that. And we like the feedback too. Feedback is good. We try to communicate with the comments that are going on both TikTok and on the YouTube here. So, and X. We haven't been following the comments on X yet, but we will try to get to that as well. And we do thank you, and we'll be back tomorrow morning. And we do thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.